And the live stream is live. I do like it when I get that live notification on the screen. We are 10 minutes away from starting. We're really at our pre-show. It's the live pre-show for today's 220-1102 Core 2 study group. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Welcome aboard. Grab a cold drink, relax, sit down. I've got all new questions for you coming up. We'll start at the top of the hour. This is the part of the live stream where I make sure everything's still working. So right now, I think we are in pretty good shape. All of the cameras look super good. These are set up. I see chat room. Hi, chat room. Good to see you. We got a lot going on. Now, I have had a good time putting together the questions for this, mostly because I didn't have all of the questions done until yesterday, which normally does not happen. Normally, I am working through a week before to put this away, really just so I can sleep better. I don't like having these things sitting there, but it's been a relatively busy time right now. I guess a lot of you know that there is a new A+ that will be coming this year at some point. Obviously, the A+ that we're using today will still be around until the end of this year. So thankfully, there's no rush for any of you. In fact, we don't even know when the new one's coming out. So CompTIA has not released any dates. So you know it's going to be months from now, that type of thing. So I'll have to figure that piece of it out. The next thing we'll do is at the top of the hour, we'll start the live stream. I will do a quick check and make sure things are where they should be. As some of you may be aware, because I mentioned this on the live stream 2 days ago, is that we have all new core equipment in the studio. For example, for those of you that watched the live streams before, this is a very different sized control than I was using before. So that's all brand new, the panel that I'm using to do the video switching. My mixer is completely different and colorful. Look at all the colors. So audio, that's a big change. Audio mixer is an enormous change for the studio. I have not updated the studio page yet on the website, so I need to do that. I need to do that. Lori, who's so good at sending me updates, if you could remind me to change the studio page with the new equipment, because I am loving my new equipment. By the way, it is really, now that we're through the first live stream, we're in our second live stream with it, really starting to figure out the nuances. I'm really enjoying the new audio mixer. It's got capabilities in it that I'm not yet taking advantage of, that I'm looking forward to using, network-based audio transfers. We've got really interesting things. I was able to simplify the audio chains that I'm using. I got rid of a standalone headphone amp. I got rid of a separate DAC, a digital audio controller for my local computer. It's great. So we'll have to figure that out. No auto tuning. I think it does have something in there I could use for that, but we will not be auto tuning any of the live streams. You're welcome. There are certain lines with which we will not cross, and that is one of them. We will not do that. I will not be doing any rapping. There will not be any singing. There will be very little joke telling. There's just certain things that are not going to work well on this stream. Let's stick to Q&A. Let's stick to your questions. Let's stick to, and all of those, which, by the way, I need to remind you, let's put up on the screen. There we go. If you wanted to put your digital pin into our picture of the world here, probably could bring this up so you could actually see it. There we go. And how about I put myself in it? No, that's not the one I wanted to do. We'll get rid of me there and put me here. Not there. How about there? So good. So good. So we are indeed working on quite a bit right now. It is very busy, which is always fun when you're creating new content and you're going through it and you're figuring out the details. But we have new things that we're working on that we've never done before. So that part of it's really exciting. And there is work to be done. There's a lot of nervousness in my mind around that. Oh, there's our 5-minute warning. 5 minutes. We'll get things going. Oh, we got a lot to work through today, but I have all new questions, so this will be very, very good. If you have a question that you would like to ask in the after show, you follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. There is a tab on the top, and you can submit questions at any time. So that's good. When is the 1102 going to retire? We will talk about that in the first 5 minutes, but I'll give you a sneak preview. Not until the end of this year. End of this year. We don't have a specific date yet, but traditionally, that's how the timing has usually worked. So I think the 1101, 1102, the current series of exams will still be around at the end of 2025, which, to your question and what you're really asking is, do I have enough time to do this right now? Yes. Should you wait for a new version to be released? No, you shouldn't. You should never do that. Never, never, never wait to get certified. Never, never. Or if you do, the people who do not wait to get certified will get their certification before you do. This is all a race, not a race against yourself necessarily. I guess part of it is, but you are competing against other people for the same jobs. And it's nice to have that credential in your pocket when you submit a resume, when you go on an interview. There's hands-on things that you could do and talk about. We can always talk about that in the after show if you'd like, but I do not ever recommend waiting to get certified. There's almost no upside associated with that, and very, very, very many downsides. So that's my overall recommendation. Obviously, there's going to be some corner cases here and there. And as we get closer to the retirement date of the current exam, of which we do not know yet, but we just know it's going to be somewhere in the next 9 months or so, or more. So whenever that happens, whenever we really know the date, then we can talk more about, is it time to make a change? But I think by the time we're making a decision about which one we want to take, both of them will be available. And so it's not going to be this idea that you're waiting, because I think waiting is a bad idea. I also have some insight into what's on the new exam. It's so similar to the existing exam. Waiting earns you nothing. It really earns you very, very, very little, if anything. So we'll figure it out. We'll get started with the live stream in about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. I am doing my last minute checks here. Everything looks good. We've got that going on down. Well, you can see my Cylons, sort of see my Cylons down there going. We'll move the lower third there for a moment. Yep, he's spinning around there, which means we are recording audio and video on 2 separate systems down here. We're obviously recording on YouTube as well. And we've got everything ready to go here. You missed the whole podcast intro because I was not live when I did it. I remembered to do it this time, so you didn't have to sit through me doing that. You're welcome. And go through that. Clayton in the chat room, just got your practice exams and exam tip book. Thank you so much for your support. Clayton says, I love your channel. Thank you again. And all the ways you've helped me learn all that I need to know. I want to say thank you. Well, you're absolutely welcome. And by the way, I'm not the one doing the hard work. You're the one doing the hard work. I'm just putting everything together. I'm putting the blocks up for you to knock them down. And there's Mal. Hey, Mal, good to see you. Thanks for joining us again. So nice to see you. Hope things are going well with you. It's always nice to see the folks that have been here, checking in, doing things. I like getting your emails. I like seeing you in the live stream. It's nice to know that you're there. It is remarkable, isn't it? I was talking with my kids the other night at dinner. We were talking about how nice it is to have people you know online, not because you keep them at an arm's length, but because they are closer to you. You get people that you would never be able to talk to or have communication with or just be able to be an acquaintance with. So that part's nice. So welcome. We have a lot going on here in 2025. I'm looking forward to it. And you will start to see it as we roll things out here. And I think probably the first half of the year, we should have interesting things going on. So I'm looking forward to it. We will get started here in just a few seconds. We are 15 seconds away from the top of the hour. Let's do that. I should probably start up my keynote. Everybody's used to seeing this. We want a green light. Did we get a green light? Did I hit the right button? No, I don't want a theme. I don't want to create a presentation. I want that button, green light. Top of the hour is here. we've got play button that we can play. We've got presentations ready to go. And you're here. What more do we need? Why don't we do this? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2025 Professor Messer 220-1102. That is our Core 2 study group for A+. It is the A+ study group where I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you're going to answer those questions live and online as we step through them. It's always fun to figure out what we might want to focus on with live and online, isn't it? One of the things that I always enjoy doing with our live streams is really looking at what we are doing from a kind of technology perspective. And I have a lot of different topics to go through here. So let's get some of these things going right now. I have lots of live stream content. And in fact, I know why. I want to show you the URL that you can visit if you would like to join us while you are here live and answer questions. Here it is. Well, that was not the wipe I really wanted, but we'll take it. Well, I mentioned earlier in the live stream, I have a new mixer. So now I'm hitting all the wrong buttons to try to get things working the way I need it to work. But there's your URL on the screen, professormesser.com/QA. You don't need a session ID. You don't need a QR code. All you have to do is pop open a new browser window and visit that URL, professormesser.com/QA. And if you are here live, you will be able to answer those questions interactively, and we'll get to see what you think the answers were. If you are watching this on a replay, you can still follow along with us. That link won't be available to you, but you can still see what's going on. In fact, just to see if you're able to use that connection and that link properly, I have for you a question from last month. We refer to this as our rewind question, just to see if you will be able to answer what this happens to be. And did I even put the question in here? Is it even in the mix of things that I have? Did I leave out that was an easy first question, wasn't it? There's not even a question there. Oh, it is here. I just put it in the wrong place. We need to move things down just a little bit and then put that next link right there. So let's give you the first question of the day, which is, which of the following would allow a Windows user to receive remote troubleshooting assistance by sending an email invitation? As you recall, I asked this question last month. This is to get us starting, to get us started on this live stream and see how well you know these. Our standing rule for the live stream, listen up on this one, please no answers in the chat room, please no hints in the chat room. We are instead going to focus on knowing what these answers might be and answering them online at the link that you see on your screen. So the question again asks, which of the following would allow a Windows user to receive remote troubleshooting assistance by sending an email invitation? Is that MSRA, SFTP, IPsec, HTTPS, or SSH? Again, please no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We will be going through and looking at what you think that answer is for that in just a moment. So stick around and we will absolutely go through what that answer might be. Well, thanks for joining us. We have so much to go through today. We do enjoy putting together these live streams, but obviously we're not in a live stream all the time. But all of our training videos are always available for you whenever you might need them. One way that you can find all of them is through the playlist that we have on our YouTube channel. You can find those at professormesser.com/YouTube. There's no registration. There's nothing hidden behind a paywall. I'm not limiting what's on YouTube. Everything is out there on YouTube. Very different way of doing training here in the modern world. And it's also a great place that you can subscribe to our channel if you would be so kind. That also helps us quite a bit. ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter, ProfessorMesser.com/X, ProfessorMesser.com/Instagram, and ProfessorMesser.com/LinkedIn are also good places to go if you happen to be on any of those social media sites, because I have a daily A+ pop quiz question. And those are all provided on each of those individual live type socially available locations. So we have a lot of different locations. It's always the same question wherever you happen to go for the day, but you can go to whatever site you like to use the most. Another great way to keep track of what's going on here every day. And it's always a good idea to see if you know some of these topics that we give you every day. Sometime in this first hour of this event, I'm going to give you instructions on how you could earn a continuing education unit credit. We refer to these as CEUs. Continuing education unit credits are only useful if you're already certified or if you have another type of certification or resource that you're trying to use some type of continuing education with. So keep listening in during this first hour, and somewhere in there you will get instructions on how you can receive an email from me regarding this continuing education unit. Also let you know that we are going to be taking questions and answering questions today from the 220-1102 exam. That is the Core 2 exam. It was released on April the 20th of 2022, which means that we estimate this exam to retire somewhere around the October-November timeframe of this year. What that means for you as we are sitting here in January of 2025 is that you have plenty of time to take care of all of your studies and earn your A+ certification with this current version of the exam. If you've been on the CompTIA website recently, they've mentioned that in the future, sometime in the spring of this year, they're planning to release an updated version of the A+ certification, but that's not going to affect us because our version of these exams continues until the end of the year. So just because they are introducing new options there does not mean that there will be taking away the old options, which is kind of nice. There's an overlap period there. So that makes it very easy if you're trying to arrange, plan, and schedule your training and certification efforts. To pass the Core 2 exam, you need to earn a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. And you can't see this here, but it does say that your certification, regardless of when you pass that second exam, it's good for 3 years after you pass that exam. So that would be good to know. I wonder if I can turn that. There we go. Now you can actually see it. I'm actually knowing where these buttons go at this point. This is also important that you know what you will be questioned on in the exam. The 1102 exam, or the Core 2 as we like to call it, discusses operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. And I have questions for you that come from all 4 of those domains during this live stream today. Of course, we have our live stream available for replay immediately after this is over on YouTube. But if we also have an audio-only version that I publish in a podcast format. So if you have a podcast listening program and you'd like to have that podcast automatically downloaded to your mobile device or to your computer, this is a great way to do it. You can simply go to professormesser.com/podcast and add the podcast from there. We're also on a number of different podcast application and podcast index sites. And if you listen on streaming media like Spotify, we're already there. So all you have to do is search for Professor Messer and you can listen there as well. There are lots of topics to go through today, and we will be covering different questions, but they're all within this 1 and 2 hour block of time. Fortunately, my marketing manager, Lori, goes through this entire live stream. Hi, Lori. Everybody say hi to Lori. She's watching the chat go by in the replay as well. She puts timestamps on every single one of these live events. This is incredibly useful when you're trying to find a specific topic, a specific question, or just simply quickly jump from questions to answers. This is a great thing to have. Thank you, Lori, for doing it. This is also something I think might help you with your studies. And of course, our entire library and past history of all of these live streams is available on our YouTube channel with all of those annotations in the YouTube video description. Also let you know that when we're not here doing a live stream, you can catch most of us over on Discord. It is our interactive chat. Also has some nice interactive learning functions on it. You can open up your own chat room. You can have streaming video from your computer. You can watch videos together. You can discuss topics from the exam. You can do your own Q&A. There's a lot going on Discord. It's a fantastic platform. There are thousands and thousands of people on our Discord server that are there and studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, or even other certifications as well. And occasionally we'll get some folks just hanging out that aren't actually working on certifications, but they're really smart people and they can answer a lot of the questions that you might have. It's a fantastic resource. Make sure you take advantage of it at professormesser.com/Discord. Also let you know that eventually you will need to take your A+ exam. It's One of the eventualities of studying this content is you do have to take the test. And of course, you have to pay for the test. Now, you can go to the CompTIA website and pay full price for your test. But why would you do that if you're in the US, Canada, or a US territory when I have the same vouchers available on my website? And those vouchers are available from professormesser.com/vouchers. They're also discounted. They cost less than going to the CompTIA website. I'm able to do this because we are a CompTIA Platinum partner. We're able to help you. Thousands of people every year come to us to be able to get their vouchers. And so we have a great relationship with the folks over at CompTIA, and they're able to offer that discount to us, which we are able to pass on to you. Not only do you get a discounted voucher on my site, but I throw in a little bit extra. It's a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that we do not sell. You can only get this ebook if you purchase a voucher or you purchase a success bundle from my website. It's not available. There's no cost to it. It's just something we include for free. And it's a list of the tips and tricks that I've compiled through my studies and taking these exams through the years. And I've taken a lot of industry exams. I have some tips for you that can help with the study process. And I have tips for you in this book that can help you during the exam itself. Some interesting strategies, some you might know about, some you might not have even thought about yet. So they're all in this Exam Hacks ebook. It's provided to you free if you get the voucher on our website at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's look at that question that we had earlier. Which of the following will allow Windows user to receive remote troubleshooting assistance by sending an email invitation? Would that be, get me out of the way there, MSRA, SFTP, IPsec, HTTPS, or SSH? And let's see what you answered for this one. We will stop our poll. Let's bring it up into a pie chart. And you can see 72% of you, that's the biggest slice of the pie, say the answer is MSRA. We have 11%, double digits, said SSH is what you should be using. 8% said SFTP, 6% say HTTPS, and 3% say IPsec. Well, 72%, that's a pretty big number, MSRA. But what does that even mean, MSRA? Well, if you're trying to figure that piece out, then you can simply look at this screen that says the Microsoft Remote Assistance. MSRA is what Microsoft is calling that these days. It's one where a user can go into their Windows system, request or ask for help from someone else, and you can invite someone you trust to help you. And they don't have an option, invite someone you distrust to help you. It's always someone you trust. I guess that's a good sign. And then help someone who has invited you. So if you're the helper or the helpee, you go to the same screen and then you can put in the information they provide. They'll make an invitation to you with that request, and then you as the technician can connect. They'll give you a password you can use. And then you'll notice in Windows 10 and Windows 11, it may not be using the same terminology any longer. Microsoft Remote Assistance, that term has now been replaced or deprecated by this newer term, Quick Assist. It's Quick Assist. It's quick and it's assist, all available in one single package, which effectively is the same thing. It's just a newer version and a renamed version of MSRA. It's available in Windows 10 and Windows 11. So if you see the term Quick Assist, you should automatically think, oh, that's the newer version of the Microsoft Remote Assistance, or MSRA. But the CompTIA exam objectives still use that terminology of MSRA in their exam objectives, so it must be important that you know that as well. You'll probably see it if you use other versions of Windows. It's probably an older documentation, so it's usually a good idea to know both of those. Hopefully that's given you some idea of what the answers are. MSRA, clearly the right answer. And for those of you that were here last month, you probably remembered that, and good for you. We did much better this month with the numbers than we did last. Would not be Secure Shell. Secure Shell is great for a terminal communication, but it doesn't have any type of email invitation. There's not Windows users actively using a lot of SSH. This is not something very, very common. So that is a very good example of how you might want to focus on Windows capabilities when you're asked a question specifically about Windows users. SFTP is a file transfer program, secure file transfer. In this particular case, that protocol is not one that involves sending email invitations and getting remote troubleshooting help. Neither is IPsec, which is an encryption and tunneling technology associated with virtual private networks or VPNs. And then we have HTTPS, which of course is our encrypted web browser communication. Sometimes it can be used for other purposes outside of the scope of web browser, but that's usually how we think about HTTPS, as being a protocol primarily associated with the web browser and with encryption when we're communicating across the network. In this case, the answer is MSRA. 72% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, one of the things that you know if you've attended one of these live streams before is that I like to do a performance-based question as our first new question of the live stream. And this month is no different. I have for you a performance-based question. Sometimes you'll see this written as a PBQ, a performance-based question. So one of the things that I like to do with the performance-based questions is first give you an overview, because if you've never seen these before in an exam, this could be a little bit jarring when you start the exam and suddenly you're not seeing multiple choice questions. A multiple choice question is very similar to the one we just had, where there was a question and then there were multiple choices to choose from, multiple options there to choose from. But with performance-based questions, it's still taking content and topics that are in the exam objectives, but it's asking them in a different way that just doesn't happen to be multiple choice. It could be a fill in the blank. It could be putting you with a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. It might be a matching question. There might be a drag and drop function. There might be pull down menus. The important part is that you're very familiar with all of these methods of answering questions. You do this in Windows all the time, but a lot of people get concerned about performance-based questions that perhaps they're going to ask something that they're not prepared for. But if you know everything that's in the exam objectives, you're going to have no problem with the performance-based questions. In fact, let's do one now. I have a brand new performance-based question for you. This was one that is a Linux-based performance-based question because there are Linux commands on the Core 2 exam. You don't have to have a Linux machine in front of you to be able to answer this question, although on your exam, they may put you at a Linux prompt and ask you to type things in. But I think we can step through this. There are 3 separate steps, 3 separate answers I am looking for from you for this particular question. This question asks, a system administrator needs to find text in a file. From the Linux command line, I want you to do these 3 things, or tell me what you would do to accomplish these 3 things. The first is view the documentation of the command that you would use for this task. See what I did there? You're going to have to know what the task is to be able to look at the command, but there's a command that you would run to look at the command. Doesn't make any sense at all, does it? It sort of does. But if you are familiar with what the command is, you should be able to view the documentation of that command. What would you type in to view that documentation? The second task I'd like you to do at this Linux command line is in the file system.log, search for the text disconnected. That's the text I want you to look for. You can see here there is a file that I am listing here called system.log. So we know the file is already there. So tell me what you would do to search for that particular bit of text. And then lastly, I want you to copy the contents of the file to a file named system.log.backup. So there are 3 separate commands I am looking for. If you think you know what these commands are, I want you to submit them using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and submit those answers. A lot of you are already putting some answers in. I'm watching some of them come through right now. You folks are really good at doing some of these. Some of you are missing a couple, but that's okay. The good part about doing these live streams is not that we want necessarily to see you get 100% of these right. In fact, if I'm doing my job, you aren't going to get 100% of them right because we're looking at many different topics, and hopefully I'm asking you the questions in a way that is challenging to you. But it also lets us know if we really have studied those particular topics and if we've really got them in the mind, in our brain, so that we can use them on the exam. So don't be worried about getting questions wrong. If you want to get something wrong, this is the time to do it. The only way you're going to learn is if you get something wrong. I used to say the only way you ever learn how to do any troubleshooting is when something breaks. That's when you really get to test yourself and see if you really know how a device works. And that's mostly true. I've been in those situations. Very stressful. You have a manager behind you breathing down your neck saying, when's the system going to be up and running? Oh no, I know exactly what I'm doing, boss. This shouldn't take long at all. I have no idea what I'm doing. So those are just normal. That's a normal part of troubleshooting. That's a normal part of the process. Why don't you go get a coffee and I'll just figure this out. Let me go Google this real quick. Let me go call somebody who's done this before and see if they can give me any tips. Sometimes it is good to have people that you know who are very smart that you can pull things in on all of those pieces. Now, obviously, for the Core 2 exam, we need to know Windows commands and we need to know Linux commands, and there's quite a few of both. So you do want to spend a good bit of time studying these particular topics. Now, we're going to go through each one of these one at a time. So when we're done today, you'll know how to do all of these tasks. This is not unlike a typical performance-based question on the exam. Not all of the questions will be at a command prompt. Not all of the questions will be simulations, if you will. Some of them will just be drag and drop. Some of them will be putting things in a particular order. But I think this is a good one to test our knowledge with Linux, which sometimes may be good to have a refresher on some of those. I know I support, if you've been to ProfessorMesser.com, that is extensive Linux infrastructure that we have built there. There is also a great deal of Windows work that we do here in the studio. I've got Windows machines also throughout doing different things because different operating systems have different strengths. And of course, if you've ever seen the front of what we are doing here, the battle station that we have is primarily Mac OS based. So I try to run all of the different operating systems. I think that's a good way to keep yourself fresh. And if you don't have all of these operating systems in your lab, you might want to think maybe adding a couple of those. Windows and Linux is an easy one to add, and it effectively is relatively inexpensive to get running. And in some cases, you can get evaluation versions of Windows Server. Certainly Linux is not going to cost you anything. So it's always a good idea to put those into your studio, run a VM, and see how well you know those topics. Let's see how well you did with this one. We have a couple of different options to run through. So let's start with the very start of this particular command, this set of tasks. And it asks, let me scroll up on my screen, a system administrator needs to find text in a file. So before we go any further, you should already be thinking about what command is able to search for text in a file. And the command that we're looking for, the one that should come to mind immediately, the one that is a staple for administrators on a Linux machine, and in fact, there are great options for this in Windows as well, is the grep command. Grep, G-R-E-P, grep. That is the command that allows you to find text in a file very, very, very quickly. And it's one that you should be very familiar with. In fact, it's so popular, there are versions called WinGrep that you could run on your Windows machine because it is very, very fast and very, very efficient. So knowing that we're going to use the grep command, let's get documentation on the grep command. So what we're going to type in is a command called man. Here's the command. Let's zoom up on it a little bit. There it is. So the command we're going to run is man, which stands for manual. We're going to look at the documentation of this. Did you read the manual? This is the command that allows you to read the manual for grep. So the way that we would do that first bullet where I want to view the documentation of the command for this task, it would be this one right here, which would be man grep. And if you run that command, you will get a screen full of information. There's the command. You'll get this or something very similar to it on your screen. So you can page up and page down through this information. You can use the / command to search through this command, through the documentation of this command. And if you'll notice that it puts you at this colon prompt down at the bottom here. We are not at the normal prompt. So to get out of the man function, get out of the manual, you would either hit Control-C or a Q, and it will exit you from that back to the command prompt. So this is a great way if you don't quite remember what the different options are in a command, you don't know exactly what the different Dash options might be. Maybe you just want to search through a file and know the number of instances that particular text appears. You don't need to see the text, just how many lines is that text on. There is a command in here that can provide you with that. I think it's dash lowercase c, isn't it? Maybe not. I have to remember myself, but that's why you have the man command, so that if you're ever sitting at the prompt, you're thinking, I don't remember what tag, what switch you would use for that. It's all right there. Very easy to sort through. So that's the first option we were looking for to view the documentation of the command for this task is man grep. We want to look at the manual for the command grep. The next thing we want to do is in the file system.log, search for the text disconnected. And so what you want to do is run this grep command. We know we're going to run grep. So how would we run grep? We would run grep with the term disconnected, and then we would put the name of the file that we would like to search through. This might be asterisk for all of the files. It might be asterisk.log to be able just to look through log files. In this case, we know the name of the file we would like to look through, and it is system.log. And if you run grep disconnected system.log, you will get all of the lines within this particular document that contain the words disconnected. And if you look at each line of this, you will see that it has the word disconnected somewhere in the line of that particular log file. So this happens so quick. It is a very, very fast search function. And you can pipe this search off to something else. You can have it go into a file that you can reference later. There's so many things you can do with the grep command. As I mentioned, it is a staple. It's one of the most common commands you will use when you're troubleshooting issues on a Linux device. Now we want to be able to do the last bullet of this particular request, which is copy the contents of the entire file to system.log.backup. Well, this is obviously not the grep command that does a copy, although there may be ways that you could configure other types of commands to effectively perform this function, but there is a very, very simple way to do this. It's with the command in Linux called cp. Cp is the command to copy. And the command that we want to copy, or the file that we want to copy, is system.log. And we want to copy system.log to a file named system.log.backup. And in fact, I have that on the screen. I ran that, and then I performed an ls to list everything that's in this directory that has the name system.log asterisk, which means it will find everything that starts with the word system.log. And hey, it found two files now, one called system.log and a brand new one that we just created called system.log.backup. That is exactly the last bullet that we would like to be able to use. So that is the answer to this particular performance-based question. Our first bullet said to view the documentation of the command for this task. That was the man grep option. In file system log, search for the text disconnected. We wanted to grep disconnected system.log. And then lastly, we wanted to copy this file. Maybe we want to save it for later. Maybe we want to modify some information and do some editing, but we don't want to edit the original file. Therefore, we would copy the contents of the file to system.log.backup. That is the cp command that is able to make that happen. So those are just a few of the Linux commands that you need to be familiar with. You don't necessarily have to know the details of every switch of every command you would run into. In fact, it's practically impossible to learn all of that information. And in fact, for your exam, there's probably a limited number of different switches you would even need to know. The exam itself tends to focus on the core functionality of these particular commands. I think using these commands allows you to remember them better. Just like we always mention, you should watch videos, you should read a good book, you should apply these ideas that you've learned, these things that you've learned with some hands-on labs, and that's where this would come in. And then you would have some practice exams that you could work on. That's our WRAP functionality, W-R-A-P. You want to be able to watch, read, apply, and then practice. So as you see this, maybe going through this task and knowing how to actually typing all of these commands in is not necessarily what you may be asked for on the exam, but having done it we now understand a lot more about the grep command, the man command, the ls command, and the cp command. So already we got 4 of those to be able to now understand and perhaps have a better understanding of what those commands actually do when you sit down for the exam. On your exam, you may get a handful of performance-based questions. Some people get about 3 of them. Some people get 5. Some people get 7. It just depends on the different roll of the dice that you get, that random number generator for the exam. But knowing these particular topics, as you can see, all come from the exam objectives. So don't worry so much about how they're asking the question. You should instead worry about what are the topics of these questions that they are going to ask. That's our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's given you some idea of what you can do to get these performance-based questions done. And hopefully you're now a little more familiar with some of these topics. Let's shift gears back to a multiple choice question. This next question on our list asks, a company would like users to authenticate to a wireless network using their Windows credentials. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be SMB, hashing, SSH, Kerberos, or WPA3-PSK? So the question, if you've been in a business environment, you've probably had to do this before. The question asks, a company would like users to authenticate to a wireless network using their Windows credentials. Which of the following would provide this functionality? And if you are someone who has been in an environment where there has been users that have been working on topics like this, well, that's fantastic, because that's going to give you a great deal of knowledge about this particular topic and how this particular topic applies to all of the things you need to know for this particular part of the exam. So if you do know the answer, as always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, I want you to go to professormesser.com/QA right here on your screen and be able to lock in your answer right there. Let's see if you happen to know what this one happens to be. Whenever I start looking at these questions, you may find that it might be easier for you to get rid of the things that you don't think it is. So if you have a particular answer in here and you think, no, it can't possibly be that one, so therefore maybe I should look at some other option, that's great. Throw it out, because you might go, if you know that one of these is definitely not the right answer, you can go from a 20% chance of guessing at it to a 25% chance of guessing at it, and so forth. So on and so forth. So that's really going to help you on the exam. Sometimes not knowing what the answer isn't is often just as important as knowing what the answer is. Even if you don't know what the answer is, it might lead you right down the path to it. So some good strategies if you are thinking about the actual exam experience and what you can do to make your opportunity a little bit better as you're sitting in front of these questions. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a company would like users to authenticate to a wireless network using their Windows credentials. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it SMB, hashing, SSH, Kerberos, or WPA3-PSK? Let's see how you did. We'll stop the poll, and we can see that the answers as they came out were a little torn, because we have 45% of you that say Kerberos, and we have 37% of you that say WPA3-PSK. It goes down to single digits for 8% for SMB. We have 7% for SSH, and we have only 4% of you that chose hashing. Well, we're if we pick the top 2, I think that's probably a good place that we could focus our efforts. These Kerberos and WPA3-PSK were the 2 that we were focusing on. But only one of these allows us to authenticate using our Windows credentials. And if you are at all familiar with Kerberos, then you're probably very familiar with this. Now, we could have also said LDAP. We could have said Radius. We could have said TACAS. All of these are part of the Core 2 exam, and all of them are very effective and available authentication protocols that are commonly used across many different organizations. Different companies use different authentication protocols because they happen to have different types of devices and software in their infrastructure. And most often people will use the one that they are already running somewhere else. Well, with Windows, if you have a Windows environment, you're probably also using Active Directory. The Active Directory services function is one central set of databases, a distributed set of databases that allows you to maintain everyone's information about their username, their password, the devices they use, the printers that are on the network, and a lot of other information stored in that Active Directory database as well. One of the ways that you can work with the Windows operating system, and in fact, the Windows operating system itself, uses Kerberos as an authentication method. So if Windows uses Kerberos to authenticate, other devices could use it as well. It's a very well-known and very popular authentication protocol. There are complexities associated with Kerberos, and not everyone prefers to use Kerberos, but it is a very effective way, especially since it's, you want to call it native to Active Directory. That's exactly the case. So that's something that can help a lot of folks. It also allows you to do single sign-on. So you only have to authenticate one time in the morning, and then your authentication is good the rest of the day. You don't have to constantly be putting in usernames and passwords as you move from resource to resource inside of your own local company network. It's been around for a long time, which makes sense why Microsoft would integrate it into Windows. It's so well done. It's got encryption built in. There's anti-replay functionality. A lot of cryptography allows you to do a lot of advanced functions. And so perfect for the Windows operating system. And it's been a very popular way to do this. So if you are logging into your wireless network, then the wireless access point or the operating system that you're using to connect to that wireless access point may be configured with something like 802.1x, which is a protocol that puts into play this whole authentication process. And then in the back end, you would configure your 802.1x config, which is probably running from the access point, to access the database of users and passwords using Kerberos. Now, if your network doesn't have Kerberos, maybe you have LDAP, you would configure your authentication process to use LDAP. It's really, I want to say it's that simple. There are more complexities associated with it, but at a very high level, that's exactly what you would do. So that's why you notice that a good number of you, 45% of you, said the answer is obviously Kerberos, and you would be correct. That is the number that we were looking for, the answer that we were looking for with this. But 37% of you say the answer is WPA3-PSK. Now, why would it not have been that answer? If you've ever logged into a network that is secured with WPA3, then you know you have to put in some type of authentication to gain access to that wireless network. But the type of authentication that's configured on this access point with this particular option is WPA3 pre-shared key. That's what the PSK stands for. Pre-shared key is probably what you're using at home, where someone says, hey, what's the password to your wireless network? Oh, it's Ninja 1. Okay, Ninja 1. And then next person comes in to the house. Oh, what's your password for your wireless network? Oh, it's Ninja 1. Ninja 1. If you go to a coffee shop, that's like, oh, the password is coffee 1, whatever it happens to be. And everybody uses the same password. Well, that wasn't the question. The question said a company wants users to authenticate to a wireless network using their Windows credentials, which means everybody has a different username. Everybody ideally has a different password. Hopefully they have different passwords. So that is one where pre-shared key is not going to fit that requirement, because with a pre-shared key, it's one password for everybody, which, by the way, you should not be using in a corporate environment. It could be argued it's probably not a good idea to use at home either, but because we have a limited number of people that would be coming into our home networks, that might be something that is a little easier to manage rather than setting up your own Kerberos server, setting up your own LDAP server, setting up your own TACAS server. We'll just give you a password and everybody can use the same password. And of course, you could just change that password anytime you'd like, because ideally it would be a relatively small number of devices in your home. So WPA3-PSK, although you should be doing some type of encryption on this network, it doesn't fit the requirements to authenticate using Windows credentials. That's not what we would use. So unfortunately, the 37% of you that chose that one just missed it. Missed it by that much. SMB, server message block. SMB is a fantastic Windows protocol, very popular Windows protocol, very much used for sending information and files and print jobs back and forth between systems. But SMB is not a way to authenticate. Doesn't provide any authentication functionality, so that's not the right option. SSH, Secure Shell, as we've already mentioned, is a great way to access a system from the command prompt. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to authenticate to a wireless network, not access a system at the terminal screen. And then lastly, hashing is a way to provide a kind of fingerprint of a different resource that you can then compare later on. Hashing is not a way to authenticate to a wireless network using Windows credentials, and only 4% of you chose that one anyway. The answer, the one you should have been looking for, is indeed Kerberos. That is exactly the answer we wanted, and 45% of you did choose that one. Well done. And the question in the chat room is, WPA3 PSK always used in the average home Wi-Fi? Not always. I would hope that you are using WPA2 or WPA3 in your home. You should be using one of those. And in most cases, I think most homes are using a pre-shared key as compared to something like an enterprise or 802.1x. Those are often used interchangeably to describe authentication to a central server containing user information. So PSK is probably what you are using at home, and hopefully you are using some type of encryption, either WPA2 or ideally WPA3 if all of the systems in your network can support WPA3. In my network, I have a combination of devices that can support both WPA2 and WPA3, and I've configured my access point to allow whichever one is the strongest on those particular systems. Hopefully that gives you something to work through if you are trying to figure out the details. Let's keep going through the questions that we have for you today. I have another not performance-based question, another multiple choice question. And it asks, a corporate app on a tablet crashes immediately after starting the app. The tablet has already been restarted. Which of the following would be the best next step? Would we enable airplane mode and restart? Would we delete and reinstall the app? Would we perform a hardware diagnostics? Would we perform a factory reset? Or would we restore the phone from a cloud backup? Well, so the first thing you do whenever you get a problem with these mobile devices is naturally just reset it. But now I've taken that away from you. We've already done the reset. We're now at the second step. So now what do we do next? If you think you know what you would do next, you need to plug it in using the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. So folks in the chat room, we're talking about authentication with that last question. Isn't TACAS Linux-based? It is not. Authentication protocols aren't specific to a particular operating system. So Kerberos, LDAP, TACAS, and many of the other authentication protocols you could possibly use can be applied to practically any operating system that you might be using. So very, very common types of authentication protocols. So therefore, it's commonly seen across every operating system that you might use. The specifics, the uniqueness of operating systems has been blending together, kind of fading together for years and years and years. And we constantly see operating systems becoming a lot more in parity with each other. So the functions of Windows now tend to be similar to the functions you might get in Linux, and some functions of that might be similar to what you would find in Mac OS. Same thing for mobile operating systems on your phone, on your tablet. So I think that's probably a trend we will continue to see more of as we start blending together capabilities. But obviously, even today, Linux has some unique capabilities that the other operating systems don't have. Same thing applies for Windows. Same thing applies to the mobile devices. Same thing applies to Mac OS. So we can have that fight. We can argue about which OS is better, but at the end of that day, none of us are right. All operating systems have some value depending on the scenario. It's really up to you as the technologist to know what would be the best thing to use in any particular scenario. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, A corporate app on a tablet crashes immediately after starting the app. The tablet has already been restarted. Which of the following would be the best next step? Would it be enable airplane mode and restart, delete and reinstall the app, perform a hardware diagnostic, perform a factory reset, or restore the phone from a cloud backup? Let's see what you chose. We'll stop our poll. And big numbers, 82% of you say the answer, 83% say delete and reinstall the app. That's what you would do. We have 16% that say perform a hardware diagnostic. We have 1% that say enable airplane mode and restart. 1% said restore the phone from a cloud backup. And 0% say perform a factory reset. What's interesting about these answers is if you look at all 5 of these answers, only one of them does a task, performs a troubleshooting task that makes no changes to the system. This should have been a very obvious one for you to see, because one of the things that we want to do whenever we are troubleshooting is not make a change to the system until we are absolutely sure that we have tried everything else without making any type of modification, because it could be that the change that you're making could be very detrimental to the data and the other components on that particular system. Sometimes making a change in one place can cause problems somewhere else. So if we can fix this problem without making a change, that would be ideal. Now, if you're working on a mobile device and the app has hung, it's crashed, it's not working properly, then we will need to perform some type of troubleshooting. Sometimes there's an error message, but as you've probably seen on these mobile devices, you might start an app and it just goes away. Maybe you get a splash screen and then it disappears. Sometimes you don't even get a splash screen. You hit the button, nothing happens. Hit the button again, nothing happens. Hit the button again, nothing is happening. So if we need to troubleshoot this particular problem, the obvious step that's not going to hurt anything would just be to restart the device. But as we said in this particular question, we've already started the device. So what do we do next? Well, we can do a number of things. We can update the app. That's one good way to fix this particular problem. We could also delete and reinstall the app. So these are common ways to troubleshoot this particular issue. I think all of those are valid ways, but I would tell you in this particular case, I think a good way to go to think about this one, deleting and reinstalling the app, I think is a very good way to troubleshoot this problem with a minimum of change, but there is change associated with that. I think a good alternative for this particular question is to perform a hardware diagnostic. It's crashing. We don't know why it's crashing. We think it might be software related, but it could also be hardware related. So it might be good before we make any changes to the system, we might want to go through the process of making sure the system itself is running properly. Because if it isn't, there's some type of memory error, there's some type of storage error. We want to know about it because then it won't matter if we update the app. However, I think a delete and reinstall the app is probably the most common response to this particular problem. So I'm going to give you both of those as possible answers. You could get either one of those on your exam, but they probably wouldn't show up the way I showed them, which was to put both of them in the same question. But I wanted to give you a perspective of how we approach these things in the corporate world, in the large world of systems, is that we want to do something that will have the least impact to the system before making any changes. And that is a common process, a common watchword with the CompTIA exams, and it's extremely common in our corporate networks. People, you do not want to make a change. In fact, making a change is often not permitted. So what can you do to this system without actually making any changes? Because if you have to make a change, we're going to have to go through some type of change control for something like that. Perhaps not change control for a manual device or a mobile device or a portable device, but certainly something we have to think about. I would say for this answer, performing a hardware diagnostic would be the better choice. Because before you are, what if you delete the app What if deleting the app actually deletes the data from the app? But they don't tell you that. You think, though, no, it'll be fine. The data's okay. I'll delete the app, reinstall, and then when you start it up after the reinstall, none of your data's there. Well, that's because you deleted the app. That is not a common scenario, but it does happen. So it's another example of how not making a change can be one of the most important things you can do. So make sure your best answer is always going to be the one that is not going to have a detrimental effect to the system. And if it is one that requires you to make a change, you can start with the changes that are easiest and then work your way forward from there. This might be a very, very good thing to consider. And hopefully that's given you some perspective, not only about how to manage this process on a mobile device, but also some ideas into the mindset of what the exam is expecting from you. And in fact, what most employers are expecting from you in their large environments too. So making no change is always a good idea. Well, you'll notice already we have talked about mobile devices. We've looked at the Linux command line. We've gone through troubleshooting tasks. Well, the only thing we haven't done at this point is talk about the cloud and printers. Thankfully, those are all on the Core 1. We don't have to worry about too much of that. What I am concerned, though, is that there's so much information on this exam. Across both of these exams, it's 137 of my training videos that consist of over 19 hours of information. And although I encourage you to watch every single one of the videos, I recognize that perhaps not everybody has that kind of time to be able to do that. So I wanted to put together a document that would contain all of that information that is within those videos and other training materials, but puts them into one place. And that is my course notes. These are my Core 2 course notes. This is the PDF version. And you can see the course notes are arranged in the same format as my videos, which means they are also in the same structure as the official CompTIA exam objectives. That makes it very easy for you to find exactly what you're looking for. Contains all of the text that's in all of my videos. All of the important command lines are in here. You'll notice that the Windows command lines are in here. Do we have Linux in here? It should be at the end of section 1. We'll keep going through the list. There we go, Mac OS commands, and then we get to Linux commands. Here they are. And now you can see where all of those commands might be and where you would go to be able to reference those. It includes all of the important graphics, all of the important tables there in this document. Not only do we have that in a digital format, we have it in a physical format. It's the same information, just in a printed book form. We've taken those dead trees and we've turned it into something useful that you can carry around so that you can always have access to this information, even if you don't have access to your laptop, your mobile device, or anything else. Sometimes having a book is just a good idea. So if you purchase the physical edition, you get the digital edition for free. So while you're waiting for me to ship this over to you, you can download the digital edition immediately. And of course, if you buy the PDF version, you can, of course, get that digital edition immediately. Way that you would find that is on my website. You can find it at professormesser.com/1102notes, or simply follow the links that are in the main menu to find our Core 2 course notes. Hopefully something you can help with, or that will help you as you go through your studies and be able to know exactly what's expected of you and your knowledge on this exam. Let's do some more questions. Next on our list is this question that asks, a company would like to use a backup method that will restore with a single backup set. Which of the following would meet this requirement? Would it be snapshot, differential backup, full backup, FTP, or incremental backup? Got a few technologies there to pour through. A company would like to use a backup method that will restore with a single backup set. Which of the following would meet this requirement? Is that a snapshot, a differential backup, a full backup, an FTP, or an incremental backup? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We can see how you do with this one. This backup question. Backup questions are many and varied on this exam. There's a whole video on backups and the different backup types and what their advantages and disadvantages are and how many different restoration sets are required. So they're all there. and being able to work through them. Hopefully you're familiar with some of these backup types, and you might be able to get rid of some just by seeing it, like not that one, it's not that one, it's that one right there. It's the only one that could be in this particular scenario. See if you know the answer. Lock it in at the link, professormesser.com/QA. Might be a good way to test your knowledge of backup types. And we will certainly go through those because the different backup types do have different requirements. They're used in different ways in different scenarios. And you tend to get a better feel for that once you get into the world of backups, which is its own science unto itself and an important science. Could you imagine a company going through this process of backing up, but then not being able to restore? This happens all the time. So very good example of where you might go with trying to help with those types of problems. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a company would like to use a backup method that will restore with a single backup set. Which of the following would meet this requirement? Is it snapshot, differential backup, full backup, FTP, or incremental backup? We'll close our poll and we'll see that the answers that most of you came up with were full backup is what you would use. We have a lot of double digits on this one though. So we're really distributed quite a bit as a second option because 15% of you say snapshot, 13% of you say differential backup, and 12% of you say incremental backup. It's quite a few to go through there. Notice only 2% of you chose FTP. Good for you, because the FTP protocol is not a backup protocol. It's a file transfer protocol, FTP. So that would not be used at all. We can throw that one out. And since we did have 58% of you said full backup, I think we can probably focus on that and some of the other kinds to be able to break this out. The backup types that we're going to look at then, let's start with a full backup. Since 58% of you chose that one, a full backup, as the name implies, backs up everything. Just all data that you've selected as backed up. And you'll notice that it is a very high backup time. It takes a long time to back up because you're copying everything to your backup media. So this is probably one of the longest backup types that you'll have because there's so much that has to be transferred. But when you need to restore it, it restores relatively quickly. Why does it restore relatively quickly? Because there's only a single backup set you need to worry about. You only need to back up everything from that one backup session, and now you can restore it onto your system, and it's done. You don't have to get multiple sets. You don't have to put everything in on one set, then put everything in on another set, then put everything in on a third set, and so on to get to where you need to restore. Instead, it's a very simple and quick restoration process relative to the other backup types. For example, differential will take all of the data that you've modified since the last full backup, and it will back up that data. The problem is that the restoration takes a little bit more time. It's a little bit faster during the backup because once you do the full backup, now you only have to back up what's changed since that full backup. But it means that you're going to have at least 2 backup sets to go through. So you'd have to restore your full backup, but you're not done yet. Then you have to restore every differential backup or the last differential backup to be able to have that in your system. So there are 2 backup sets that you need to work through. So the other option that you might often run into is an incremental backup, where you are first doing the full backup, and then you are taking every day a little piece of what's changed, everything that has changed, and you're backing up every day for every change, which means if you're doing a 7-day backup, you have 1 full backup and 6 incremental backups, which means if you need to restore, you need to restore all of those, the full backup, and then every day of the incremental backup until you've caught up with everything. So that is probably the one that does take the longest to restore. The synthetic backup is a way that you could create a full backup from all of the stuff that you've already done. Because after all, if you have a full backup and you've done an incremental backup for 6 days, well, couldn't you just take all of that data, crunch it together, and make a full backup out of it without having to actually do a full backup? Yes, you could. Same thing with the differential backup. So this is a way to create a brand new full backup without having to actually perform a full backup. And that's why we call it synthetic, because it's a real full backup, but we didn't actually perform a real full backup. We synthetically created a full backup. And that makes it for a very low backup time because we're using the backups we've already done. And the restore time is low because it's a full backup. That's a really nice way to make that happen. Full backup is obviously one of the most important types of backups because we're covering everything. But you also have to think about this ongoing thing. It might take your network 6 hours to perform a full backup of a single system. So if it takes that long, you can't do one of those, two of those, three, four of those a night. You run out of time. Time is your biggest problem for backups because you want to capture the data, but you've only got a limited amount of time while people aren't using the network, while you can back things up. There are a lot of real-time backup options. There are a lot of backup options that will take things throughout the day. There are snapshots. There's a lot of different ways to do backups and a lot of interesting technologies around backups. But for this particular question where we wanted to use a backup method to restore with a single backup set, there was only one option in this list that gave you a single backup set, and that would indeed be a full backup. So there you go. 58% of you got that one absolutely right. And that's why differential backup and incremental backup and FTP, we've already talked about those. A snapshot is technically a backup type. It is often referenced and very common to see with virtual machines, VMs, because a snapshot, you can push a button and say, capture everything in this VM at this point in time. And that way, if you ever need to go back and restore to a particular point in time, you just go back to the snapshot. Now, snapshots themselves are very similar to an incremental backup, where it's only taking a snapshot of what's changed since the last snapshot. So that is not one that commonly has a single backup set, although technically we don't really talk about snapshots as being a backup set in the traditional form. They are very self-contained, but they are incremental, and there's not a single one of those. You have to have all of those snapshots to be able to go back in time to that original snapshot. So that's the point we were trying to make with that. Hopefully you got a familiarity with backups. If you're not familiar with them, make sure you check them out. It's in my video section 4.3, and the video name is Managing Backups. Good one to go with. Well, we are definitely past the top of the hour at this point. We've gone through quite a number of questions, but I have another one for you before we are done today. Let's do one more here. We could fit in another, right? Even though we're in a little bit of overtime, I think we can. This next question is not going to be one from this set that I've created here. Instead, I want to give you a question that's from my practice exams. If you've not seen my practice exams before, it is a book that contains 3 separate full-length 90-question practice exams, including performance-based questions, multiple choice-based questions, and much more. All of this in one single document. Now, we have a PDF version, just as we do with our course notes, and we have a physical version, although I have this is my 2201101, the same idea on the 2201102, same function of the book. And I have for you a copy of this book that is in front of me. Let's look at a question that comes from my practice exams book. And this practice exam book is one that I created, by the way, because I looked at a lot of practice exams on the internet. Some of them are okay. There's a lot of really bad questions on the internet. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could really practice what the real exam would feel like? So I created a set of questions that have a similar tone, a similar style, a similar cadence as what you might find during the actual exam. These are all original questions, of course. I wrote every single one of these questions, but I wanted to be sure that you could have something that would help prepare you a little bit better for what you might run into. So let's see how you did with this one. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Our question asks, this is question A35 from the first exam in the practice exam book. It's on page 13 if you wanted to look through your practice exam book. The question asks, a network administrator has configured all of their wireless access points with WPA3 security. You may think you know the answer already. I'm not sure you do. Which of the following technologies would be associated with this configuration? Would it be RC4, TACAS, TKIP, or GCMP? Now, if you think you know the answer, or you're working on the answer, this is a PDF. So, of course, you can highlight different parts of this text. If you have it on a tablet with a stylus, you can write on this document itself. If you think you know the answer, you can go through different answers. Maybe you don't think you know, so maybe instead of a green, we'll use a yellow. You can make changes to this. It's a PDF, so you've got a lot of flexibility with using that. Because it's a PDF, if you wanted to see a detailed answer for this, even though we're on page 13, the answer is on page 71. And if you've worked with PDFs, the last thing you want to do is scroll down to page 71 and then scroll back to where you started. So what I did in my book is I created hot links. So if you want to go to the details on page 71, you just click the word, the details, and it goes to page 71. Boom, just like that. And in fact, right there at the top, there's the question. And you can see that the answer is D, GCMP. Now, in my book, every time you see an acronym, I try to spell out what that acronym is. So you'll notice that not only in the answer am I telling you why the right answer is right, my problem is I never get the right answer right. I always get the wrong answer. And in a lot of the questions I found online, it did not give you any type of feedback on why a wrong answer was wrong, which I think was a real missed opportunity. How are you supposed to learn by getting it wrong if there's nothing to prompt you why it was wrong? So in my book, every single wrong answer is fully documented. So you could see why this particular answer does not apply to this particular question. And you could see RC4 wasn't right. Here's why. TACAS wasn't the right answer. Here's why. TKIP was not the right answer. Here's why. So you could step through all of these to understand why this would be the right answer and why it would be the wrong answer. And for those of you that get the question right, I highly recommend that you read through the wrong answers as well, because on your actual exam, you may not get a question about GCMP. You might get a question about RC4. You might get a question about TACAS. You might get a question about TKIP. It's nice to have more feedback about that technology and how it fits into this crazy groupings of acronyms and technologies around wireless networks. So another great thing that's here, if you don't recognize these acronyms, you don't understand the question, I also put a link to the video that is where I created this question from. So if you don't understand these terms or you don't understand what I'm asking, you can watch the video and that should fill you in on the details. Or if you get the question wrong, you think, I might want to spend a little more time on that topic, here's a link that will take you right there. And if you're doing this on the physical book, there's a QR code right at the bottom of the detail, and you can use your phone with the QR code and go straight to that video as well. When we're done here, it's a PDF. There's a back button in your PDF. Did you even know there was one of those? We'll click the back button and go back to where we started. There's where we began. You can see the annotation I did here, and then we can go to the next question that's in the list and continue through the entire set of practice exams. I have practice exams available for the Core 1 exam, the Core 2 exam, and this is something that you should really wait until you go through the videos, you've read a good book, you've done some labs. Now you're ready to test yourself and see if you really know and have really captured the essence of all of these different technologies. If you want to get your hands on this, you can get it at professormesser.com/core2pe or follow the links from the main menu on the Professor Messer website. Well, there's also some free resources you should have in your back pocket. One of the best that you could have is CompTIA's own official exam objectives. Unlike other certification programs that you may have seen in the industry, CompTIA tells you everything you need to know to pass this exam. This is a relatively unique thing because most of the time, Cisco isn't going to tell you everything you need to know. Microsoft is not going to tell you everything you need to know. Same thing with practically anyone else in this industry. But if you were to grab these set of exam objectives, it gives you a bulleted breakdown of everything that's important to know. For example, we talked about Linux in our performance-based question today. If you go to section 1.11, here are identifying all the common features and tools of the Linux client/desktop OS. Here's all the commands you need to know. LS is in here. There it is. CP was in here. There it is. We have, I scrolled through. I have, here's more of them. We have the grep command right there, and there's the man command. So all four of those commands we did today are in here, but notice there's a lot more you need to know. If you're ever at a point where you're wondering, do I really know everything I need to know to pass this exam? you need this document. It is the best checklist that you could use. You can find this by going to your favorite search engine and typing in CompTIA Exam Objectives, or just use the link that I have there. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, and I have a link that will take you over to the CompTIA website. Be able to do that. We have one of these study groups for A+. We do 2 A+ study groups a month. 2 days ago, we did our Core 1 study group. This is our Core 2 study group, and we've already scheduled our study groups for next month. If you would like to join us for those as well, we have them already scheduled for February the 4th and February the 6th. Also this month, in January, we have our Network Plus and Security Plus study groups. We've also scheduled those for February as well. Now, sometimes these dates can change. Sometimes my world gets a little crazy. There's chaos that happens, and I will need to move one of these dates. The instant I make a change, I update that calendar. So if you ever want to know what the latest update is for any of these live events, or you might even be watching this on a replay months from now, and you're wondering, well, when is the next one? We're way past February. All you have to do is go to the calendar. ProfessorMesser.com/calendar will take you exactly to where you need to go, and you'll know exactly when our next live event is going to be. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A. I think we did pretty well today with our Core 2 topics. Maybe we learned something as well, but we're not done yet. I have questions that you have created for me. And if you would like to add those to your list, we do have a link. You can go to professormesser.com/QA, same one we've been using this whole time. At the top of the screen is a tab, and you can submit any questions you would like for me to answer in our next hour that we like to call our after show. Don't forget about our course notes and our practice exams. One link that will take you there is the professormesser.com/1102success. We also, of course, have our discounted vouchers. Why would you pay full price for a voucher when I have the same vouchers over on our site at professormesser.com/vouchers? And of course, if you want to find us on your favorite social media site, just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find me on. And if I'm there, it will take you there. If I'm not there, it will not take you there. It's pretty simple from that perspective. So you have some ideas of where you might want to find us. If you really want to help us, though, I would love it if you were to give a thumbs up to this video. You might also want to consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. That also helps us quite a bit and costs you absolutely nothing. And you have my eternal gratitude for that as well. Thank you so much for that support. Stick around for our after show. We have a lot more to go through. I'll take all of your questions. Thank you for joining us in this first hour, and we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, I'm going to take a sip. One moment, please. Let's now get the after show going. I can get rid of all of these different things that are on my screen. I can bring myself back. Oh, here we go. There we are. Hi, everybody. We should be able to step through these. Now we can do the after show part. This is kind of a fun part because I have done no preparation for this. This is one where you are the one that will be really guiding us through this next step. And if you would like to do that, I have an entire set of questions that you can submit online. Let me make sure that my Q&A on this side has that particular notification. So if you go out to professormesser.com/QA, there's a tab right at the top that says that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution will not appear immediately, but I'll be able to go through them and answer whatever questions you might have. Oh, thank you so much, chat room, for reminding me about the CEU. I was just talking. So let's give you an explanation of where you can go to process a CEU or to receive a webinar category CEU from me. You know, one of the things that I think is useful when renewing, there's so many different ways to renew your certification. So for those of you that are working, you've already earned your A+ certification, you would like to get an A+ certification and then renew it using these continuing education units, here's how you would do it. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and from there, there's a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put January 2025 Core 2, and then in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, full differential, incremental. Those are your super secret code words of the month. Full, differential, incremental. 3 code words this month. So you can add any other text to that message you would like. I read through every single one of them. I get so many of these, I'm not able to respond back to all of them, but I do read through all of them. And I love to hear the stories about where you are in the certification process, what you're doing to renew your certification, or any questions that you might have just in general. There are also, going through that process takes me about a week to go through all of these and reply. You'll receive an email from me that certifies that you were here for 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. And for A+, you need 4. You can accumulate 4 of those in a 3-year renewal period. So again, the way you would do that is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click on Contact Us, put in your name, your email address, put in that you are in the subject line as Core 2 January 2025 or January 2025 Core 2. Anything like that is fine. Don't worry. We're not looking for letter perfect. I just need to know where you got these words from. Helps me out a lot. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month: full, differential, incremental. There you go. And then I will sort through these probably this weekend. I'm going to go through them. So if you submit them today, hopefully I'll be able to turn it around in just a couple days for you so that you always have access to all of that. Well, thank you for your reminding me of that. Sometimes I just keep going. I talk too much and it just gets past me. So thank you for reminding me. Now what I'd like to do is go through some of the questions that you have submitted. Have a look at the things that you have sent to me, and let's see what type of questions you have. This can be about technology. It can be about IT. It can be about certifications. It can be about anything. You're welcome to ask anything you would like, and hopefully I can answer pretty much anything you would like. We'll find out as we sit through all of these. Let's start with something, and we're going to kind of build on things that we've talked about already in this particular scenario. We'll talk about this one that comes to us from Nick. Nick says, I'm taking my 1102 A+ tonight. There's no stress involved, right, Nick? This is no pressure, but we all know that you're taking your exam tonight. So we want to know how it goes. The question that Nick has: any strategy/advice on how to optimize my time and answer questions effectively? Well, I'll give you 2. There is limited time today for any type of detailed study. But if you are a week out for your exam, and indeed for you, Nick, you may want to go through the exam objectives and start looking through for topics maybe that you don't immediately recognize or that you feel you might need a little bit more help on. For example, you might look at section 2.5 and you may say, well, I'm very familiar with Defender antivirus. I'm very familiar with the Windows firewall, but users and groups, local versus Microsoft account, let me go through that one more time and see if maybe I can brush up a little bit more on that particular topic. You do have time enough right now, if your exam is tonight, to maybe go through each one of these bullets and at least put a check mark by it. If you're more than 50% familiar, maybe it's a check mark. If you think you're under the 50% mark, maybe that's one you circle and you do a little bit more study on it. Same thing, maybe BitLocker and BitLocker to go, and you're thinking, oh, what's the difference between them? I'm not sure I remember. Well, now you need to read up on those because you might get questions about either one of those. So that's one thing you can do. To answer the other part of your question, answering questions effectively. One of the things you may not realize if you've never taken one of these exams before is that you can skip all the way to the end. You could just next your way all the way to the end if you would like. And as you are going through these questions, you can flag a question. So if you know the question 100%, oh, I know that one. It's D, next. And you don't have to go back to that question. You've already answered it. You're 100% sure that's the answer. There's no reason to go back and look at that question again, unless you happen to have time. But you may come across a question where you think, I'm 50-50 on that one. Let's flag that question. There'll be a checkbox at the top that says flag. You can flag or mark the question. And when you mark that question, when you get to the end, it will show you an index of all of the questions you have answered. So 1 through maybe 90, probably less than 90, but it could be as many as 90. But you get 1 through 90, and it tells you what you answered for each of those questions, and it has a marker that shows this is one you put a mark on. And so if you put a mark on question 35, you can click that on the screen, and it will go back to question 35. And then you can think about that question some more. See if you really want to lock that one in. You can get rid of the flag. Yep, I think I got the right answer. We'll go to the next thing. Now, if you have time, obviously, one of the best things you can do is to read through every single question again. Not everybody has that much time at the end of their exam. Occasionally, that has happened with me. And reading back through them can be very interesting. Most of the time, I keep my original question. But sometimes reading through it the second time, I discover there's a not, N-O-T, in the question. I answered, it says, what is the thing that does this? And I go, oh, there's your answer. But then rereading it, it actually says, what is the thing that does not do this? Like, oh, it's a completely different answer. So sometimes having a little more time, you're not quite as rushed. You can read through the question again, and you realize you might have misread it the first time through. In those cases, it makes a lot of sense to change your answer because you know you read it wrong to begin with. But I tend to keep my first gut answer sometimes. If I'm just not sure, I tend to keep the one that I'm leaning the most towards. I second guess myself quite a bit on these exams. That takes time. It takes away from your first gut instinct of what maybe your subconscious thought the right answer was. And sometimes I want to trust my subconscious a little bit better to be able to do that. That's just a couple tips that might help you. Hopefully that can give you an idea of things you can work on as you're getting through this exam. And please let us know how it went. Just go to my website, click Contact Us. All of those messages come directly to me. I'd love to hear how your exam turns out at the end. No pressure. We'll see. The one good thing about these exams, if you pass, fantastic. If you don't pass, well, it's okay. We'll just take it again. Nothing bad happened. Nobody died. There wasn't any type of car accident. The world did not end. You're okay. We'll just take the exam again. So I put a lot of stress on myself and anxiety on myself for these exams because I don't want to spend the money again. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into this. I don't want to have to face people and say I'm a failure, but they all know this. It's my family. They already know I'm a failure. So I don't have to worry about that. They expect it to be bad. So when I walk in and go, hey, I passed, they're all very happy. Maybe they don't all think I'm a failure. Maybe I'm talking a little bit more out of that, but I feel that way. You feel that way when you walk in an exam. You don't want people to think badly of what you're doing there. It's okay. The only person that really matters is you. And until you decide to quit, there's always a chance you're going to pass this exam. There's always an opportunity to improve yourself. There's always an opportunity to pass that exam. So don't worry about failing. I've failed certification exams before in the past. There was one certification exam I failed twice before finally passing it. Happens to everyone. So don't worry so much about, am I going to pass? I'm going to fail. Don't listen to those people in your head. Focus on the exam, know the exam objectives. And if you do that and walk in the exam, you're going to do just fine. No problem there. Let's get some more questions that you have submitted. Let's see what else you have in the list of things that are here. There are a number of questions. This is a pretty good one about studying and how we would do it. It's from my good friend, Anonymous. Anonymous asks, hello, Messer. This is a general question I think most people will want answered. Do you suggest getting hands-on with Active Directory for Core 2? If so, how? Also, what would be the best way to memorize all the commands for Windows and Linux? Well, let's have a look real quick at what this would involve. We go back to the exam objectives. We have gone through, let's go to section 1, because right in section 1.2 are all of these Microsoft command line tools, the netstats, the GP results, the winvers, they're all in there. But there's also the Linux commands. If we scroll down here to section 1.11 are all the Linux commands that we need to know. Those are important as well. And then later on in this same set of exam objectives, they have a section on Windows and working with Active Directory. So this can be a challenge when you are working through the details of this exam, that if you don't have any context, if you don't have any any real world use of these commands. They just become a sort of this thing that you read that you somehow have to remember, but you don't understand why you're doing it. You don't understand why you would ever use grep. You don't understand why you would ever use winver. You don't have any context for those. And I think there's also a very good case to be made about the physical activity of performing these commands, physically typing these in on the screen, physically seeing the results, and physically interpreting those results fires different synapses than watching a video or reading a book. So hands-on is an important part of this. I mentioned earlier that our philosophy here is WRAP, W-R-A-P. You want to watch some videos, you want to read a book, you want to really actively use these topics as you go through them. And you want to find some way to get more hands-on with those. And then the P is the practice part of it. So applying it is the part I want to talk about, is the A part of WRAP. And applying these means you're doing some hands-on, you're doing some labs. Some of these you can do yourself. You'll notice that if you go through my videos where I'm demonstrating these commands, that I use the commands in a context that you could do on your own computer. You can ping the same commands. You can run the same tests that I do, because the files that I'm using are files that either you already have on your system or some that you can easily copy over. So that's a really good example of doing that. Active Directory has its own challenge because you really would have to build your own Active Directory infrastructure to be able to perform your own hands-on. And not everybody has the time or the experience to build out an effective Active Directory infrastructure. And that's why I often will recommend using third-party labs. We have great third-party labs on our site from CompTIA. Their CertMaster labs are so good. They are built in this virtualized world where you can do anything you would like in that virtualized world. But obviously there is a lab that takes you step by step through the actual lab process. And it's one that not only can you follow their steps, you can try different things and see what happens. And then if you mess them up, you can reset it and go back to what you were doing. That's why we have those labs as an option on our site. We have a recommended study materials section, and those are the labs that I recommend because I've used them. I've watched them evolve through the years to really be this remarkable set of labs that gives you that tactile feedback, that visual feedback of what you're doing, and it adds some context. There's also Active Directory in there. You don't have to build your own Active Directory infrastructure. So just another thing, whether you use those labs or other third-party labs, getting that hands-on can be very, very useful. So I would highly recommend for both Active Directory and the Windows and Linux commands, just do them. It's remarkable after looking at somebody perform a trace route and then you doing your own trace route, you look at it differently. I think it does do something inside of our brain that makes us think about it in a different way and locks in some of those important parts of that single command so that if we need to reference it again, it's now already recorded in our brain and we can just replay the recording that we had. It's a different way of learning. And that's why I always recommend use many different forms of learning. Maybe not everybody needs labs, but having them there really helps fill in a separate block that videos, books, and practice exams simply can't do. So you decide which of those four things you need. Maybe you need all four. Maybe you just need one of them. Really depends on, everybody's a little bit different, but that might be something that helps you as well. Let's do some more questions in this list. Let's talk more about career. Let's talk about what we would do with these. This is Ian. Ian says, after completing the 1102, would you recommend moving on to Security Plus, Network Plus, or another certification? I think industry certifications are always good to have. And in fact, throughout your career, you will probably be working on some certification type, usually for some process that you're doing. It may not be A plus Network Plus Security Plus. It may be a certification from a particular manufacturer. It might be a certification that your employer would like you to have. It might be a certification that helps you with a new project that you're starting up. Maybe there's a cloud project, so you need a cloud certification. Maybe you're installing a new set of firewalls, so you need a Palo Alto Network certification. Sometimes what you're doing tends to dictate what cert you need. It also works in the opposite way. It may be that something you would like to do requires you to perform a set and earn some certifications. So maybe you're looking at a job, you're currently working in a network administration role, and you're thinking, I'd like to do something in security. I've been looking at some job postings. I've been looking at the description of jobs that are available in my area, and a lot of people are asking about Security Plus. That's one I should go take. I always recommend that you have a reason for getting a certification. There has to be a means that you're going through, but that means is for an end that you are eventually finding. What is the end that you're trying to get to? What's the end game? Are you trying to get a new job? Are you trying to move up in your existing role? Are you trying to prepare for a particular project? Is there a particular mandate that has been brought down by a set of customers or a set of industry requirements that requires you to get a particular certification? It just depends. Everybody's in a different scenario. So you need to think about, before you decide or let someone else decide what certification you should be taking, you should take a look at what you're doing and where you want to go. That should help you set the stage for where your direction happens to be. If you go on the internet and you ask people, okay, I just finished my A+, what do I do next? You'll get 100 people telling you different things. Oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. None of us know the answer though, because we don't know what you want to do. Only you know what you want to do. And by the way, one nice thing about IT is what you want to do can change all the time. Today, you may be working towards a security role. In the future, you may be doing a lot more with the cloud. So you may find short term, you're working on that Security Plus certification, but you may find once you earn the Security Plus, maybe you want to add on some of the cloud-based piece. Or it may work the other way. Maybe a lot of the jobs in your area need cloud certifications. Okay, well, let's go look at the cloud certs. One of the best things you can do is look through some job postings. It's going to help you get a better lay of the land. You're doing some recon. You're creating a spreadsheet. There is a video that's in the YouTube video description of this video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. And I give you a set of best practices to use to set those directions for yourself. And it gives you some things that you can do, like creating a spreadsheet where you can put in every job in your area that you feel you're qualified for, and you're documenting for all of those jobs, what formal education do they want? What industry certifications are they looking for? What technologies are they asking that we be familiar with? And you can start creating your own database of jobs in your area that you can then, once you've got about 10 or 15 or 20 of those in the spreadsheet, you can take a step back and look at that spreadsheet and say, looks like 60% of these jobs are asking for a Security Plus. It looks like 80% of these jobs would like us to have knowledge with Linux. So you could start getting an understanding of where the industry is going in your area, and then you can start shifting yourself into those areas in an effort to make yourself more marketable. It's a strategy. And although sometimes we can just decide, I want to do security, so I'm going to go do Security Plus. That's not a bad strategy, but it may not necessarily jive with the strategy that employers have for you. So what you may want and what employers may want, sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they are not the same thing. So you have to start making some decisions about, do I then study something I don't necessarily have at the top of my list? Or do I start looking at other positions in other geographical areas? So you've got some ideas, you've got some things you can work on. Hopefully that can give you an idea of where you might want to put your efforts. Maybe you can find a good middle ground or a clear direction on where you'd like to go. Very often that direction is going to be one that you set after looking at everything else that happens to be out there. Some more questions. Let's keep going through this list. As always, you can submit questions by using the link on your screen. go to professormesser.com/QA. You can lock in your question into this list, and then I'll read through these that you might happen to have. We'll happen to see which ones are there. So let's go into this mix of things. There's quite a bit to work through. Some folks, this is sort of an aside. Somebody did submit a question, said, can we send you practice questions? Well, I can't take your practice questions. I can't do anything with any practice questions you send me. You've copyrighted those questions first. If they're from a third party, I definitely can't do anything with them. I always recommend, if you're reading through a practice question and you have a question about it, I recommend you take it back to the person who wrote it. Take it back to the publisher that published it. They will be the best person to ask any questions about that particular question. I unfortunately cannot comment on questions that someone else has written. Not because I can't comment on it. It's because very often the questions that I get are very badly written questions. People always send me questions and say, this makes no sense to me. Can you make any sense of this? The answer is, of course, no, because it's a badly written question that you got on the internet somewhere. So I get a lot of bad questions sent to me. So we could save a lot of time right now. It's a bad question. And then you can, or go to the person who wrote the question and ask them and say, I don't get it. And they will be the best one to answer those questions. Now, if you have questions about the questions that I have written, well, of course, you can contact me about those. I am more than happy to address anything you might have. But as you've seen in my practice exams book, where you already have a list of here's why the question is right and here's why the wrong questions are wrong, a lot of those are already taken care of for you, which that's a win-win. In my book, you have all the information you need and you don't have to ask me anything extra. Hopefully, I've covered all the bases with those particular questions. Let's keep going through your list. We'll keep going in here. As I mentioned earlier, you can use CEUs to renew your certification. That's not the only thing you can do to renew. Joshua asks, what are the options to renew an A+ certification? Now, fortunately, CompTIA does give you a lot of different options for renewing your certification. On the negative side, if it is a negative, CompTIA gives you a lot of options for trying to renew your certification, and you have to sift through which all of those different options they have available to you. Now, in reality, the options they have, there's probably about 4 of those. This is the CompTIA website. I'm going to click on the link for continuing education, and you can see they have this step-by-step process they put you through. Let me get rid of some of the pop-ups they have here. The things that they put you through, let's see if I can, there we go. So we can, why do you need to renew? Let's learn about the renewal process. What path should you choose? And then you could submit your CEUs. Let's go through the choose your renewal path. So at a very high level, you can renew with a single activity. That sounds good, but it's not so easy. You can renew with multiple activities. Takes a little more work, but it's much easier to do. It takes a little more time though. There is one option in the single activity section I do want to make you aware of, and it is called CertMaster CE. CertMaster CE is a CertMaster continuing education. And if it matches the particular exam that you took to earn your certification, you can renew using this CertMaster CE computer-based training. It's a CBT. So it steps you through a series of lectures and Q&A, and you have to answer all of the questions correct to continue. And if you don't answer them all correct, you have to do it all over again. So it's not an all or nothing scenario. You can just keep going through the questions until you get them all correct. And when you get through the entire CertMaster CE, which takes a number of hours, you are certified. You're recertified. You have now renewed your certification. It is a very quick way to do this. It costs a little bit more than submitting CEUs, but not much more. And it's one that you can do very, very, very quickly. The people have come to my website, they've come to our Discord, and they've said, I just realized my certification expires tomorrow. What can I do? Well, you can't really study for a new certification. That takes weeks or months. You can't really get a bunch of CEUs together unless you happen to have done something and you have the documentation of that available. This individual did not. So we recommended, well, why don't you just use CertMaster CE? You can buy it right now, download it and start using it. For A+, it's $133, so it's not awful for a certification. He went through it in a day. Hours later, came back to the chat and said, I'm recertified. I'm done. 3 more years. So just like that, it is a very good way to go through the renewals. Now, there are different advantages and disadvantages to all of these different renewing processes. Also, in the links in this YouTube video description is another video I did on how to renew your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus in just a few hours. And I do talk about CertMaster CE, but I also talk about 3 or 4 other ways to renew your certification, and I give you the advantages and the disadvantages of both of those. You might want to have a look at that video. That might give you a little more detail and help you out with deciding what path you should go down to renew your certification. Because I would hate for you to have that cert and then you lost it, it expired, and you didn't have an opportunity to renew. When so many renewal options are relatively easy, it may just be a couple clicks and you've renewed. The only way to know is if you go through that list and see which one applies to you. More questions. Let's keep going down the line of this list. This is one of the things I heard a message or someone had mentioned, I think it was maybe in our chat the other day, about getting a job in IT. And one of the things they said is, well, there's not really a help desk anymore, is there? That's not a job you should look for. What do they call it these days? What do you do if there's not a help desk? And to other people's points, they're saying, where are you that there's not a help desk? Everybody has a help desk. And that is a very common place to begin. But it's not the only entry-level position into IT. This question from Giancarlo asks, what job titles should someone trying to get their foot in the door in tech look out for besides help desk? So the idea of help desk, I think a lot of us think of help desk as they're sitting there, you've got the microphone on. Thank you for calling the help desk. How may we help you? What problem do we? Oh, you have a password reset. Let us reset your password. A lot of people think it's just you sitting at a desk with a mic on and doing this, but not all help desks are that way. I worked at a corporate help desk for an insurance company. And of course, we had a phone and people would call us and submit tickets and we would help them out with their problems. But a lot of what we did was visiting people at their desk, talking about the problems that they had, and then resolving the problem right there. Not all help desks are simply you're on the phone trying to troubleshoot that way, but some are. And maybe that doesn't really appeal to you. My very first job out of school in working in technology was a field service technician. That's a very good entry-level position. It requires you to take some technology they're giving you and take it to another customer and install it. So someone that needed a memory upgrade, they give you the memory, they say, go to this person's computer and upgrade their memory. Or they'll give you a hard drive and they'll say, this person's hard drive crashed. You need to perform this warranty replacement. You will swap out the drives. Or here's a motherboard and you have to replace the motherboard. Sometimes they're relatively involved. This is why I tell people that the different jobs that are out there entry level can be very, very different from each other. And in some cases can be a lot of fun. I really enjoyed, I look back on that field service position with I only lasted that role 9 months, but I think back on it all the time because you're constantly learning. It was my first job out of school. I was really learning on the job for a lot of these tasks. But what was interesting is you were rolling up to a problem that was different every time, and you were meeting with different people with different companies every time. What was interesting is that job introduced me to a company that was an insurance company in town that had a massive set of buildings and had hundreds and hundreds of people working there. And they needed somebody knowledgeable in Windows to be able to work and help them in their service desk. And because I had gone to all of these different organizations, seeing all of these different environments, working in many different applications with many different types of hardware, I had a very diverse set of knowledge that they found appealing, and they ended up hiring me to work at that particular location. So for 5 years after that, I worked at that insurance company. At the time when I took the job as a field service tech, I didn't know where this was going to take me. I had no idea what this would lead to. And certainly now, looking back, I had no idea that this is what it would lead to, but you can't plan for those types of things. You just sort of have to let the universe take you down that particular path, and you'll figure out where it goes once you get there, kind of thing. But that was always a fun job. So field service, that might be an option for you. Service desk and help desk is still a good option. But there are other entry-level positions. If you're in a very large geographical area, there may be a network operations center, a NOC, or security operations center, a SOC. Those often have entry-level positions where you're sort of a help desk, but it's for networking. You're sort of a help desk, but it's for security. And instead of being the help desk, you're more of a triage expert. Someone calls in and says, we're not able to connect to our wireless network. All right, well, that might be a pretty high priority issue. Let's get that one moved up and get someone out there right away. Or somebody calls and says, I can't ping a particular device on the internet. Oh, well, do you need to ping that device to do your job? Well, no, but it's just weird that I can't ping it. All right, that's a lower priority. So you get to set those priorities in the NOC to have people have a look at those particular problems. So I think there are many different ways to find different entry-level positions. I think reading through the job description should give you the insight you need. And they'll often tell you in the job description, this is an entry-level position. We're looking for someone with 6 months experience or more. We're looking for someone who it's their first position. They'll give you some clues. But if you're looking through it and it says tier 2 network administrator, well, that's probably not a position that you're going to start in with IT. But let me tell you, from the perspective of someone who has been through these positions in IT, please, if you have an opportunity to get into any of these entry-level positions, go get into that entry-level position. That is one of the hardest barriers that you're going to have to break through in the world of IT, is that very first job. Getting your foot in the door is a very, very important and very valuable thing to have happen. And if somebody offers you, hey, we have a job, it's a help desk position, you'll be taking calls from 8 in the morning to 5. These calls are about our internal apps. You may be thinking, oh, I really don't want to do this. And maybe you don't want to necessarily do that, but you're not going to do it the rest of your career. What's interesting, though, I found at the help desk level, at the service desk level, is that you're always learning something. And sometimes you're learning about technology. Doing password resets is not very difficult. You learn it in a day, and then you end up doing password resets for the next 6 months. But you're also going to learn about networks. You're also going to learn about operating systems. You're also going to learn about patches and security issues. There's all kinds of different things you learn just by taking all of these calls. The other thing that is so useful to know, especially in these larger companies, is you're not just learning the technology that's being used in that company, you're learning who works with that technology in the company. I will tell you, the manager of the help desk doesn't want you there more than 6 months either. Their job is to get you trained up on the processes of this company, how it works, what applications they use, but perhaps more importantly, who does what? Who helps with the network problems? Where are the security people? Who do we call in facilities if we have an issue? You start learning the lay of the land, and now you're more prepared after that 6 months is over. Maybe you decide, I want to go work with the desktop team. I want to go work with the Linux folks. I like the networking guys. Let's go work on the network side. And you ask them, hey, network people, I've been here 6 months. I've learned a lot. I've worked with you during this time. Do you have entry-level positions? Do you have something I could move into? And what type of credentials are you looking for? And they'll say, well, we would love it if you had a Network Plus cert, and maybe you should come and hang out with us when we do our network upgrade next week. You'll get a feel for what we do. Being able to shadow folks like that can be very, very valuable to your career. Not only are you learning about the technology they're working with, you're learning about them. You're getting a feel for their corporate culture. You're getting a feel for how it might be to work in their department, and they're getting a feel, and maybe this is somebody we can work with. So in essence, volunteering your time with that particular piece, some people feel that it's taking time away from you. I consider it to be more of an investment. And I've done a lot of weekends and shadowing and helping out. And sometimes you're doing just grunt work. Maybe they need all hands on deck because they're building out a new training center and they're building out 4 training rooms, and all of this equipment has been drop shipped in, and we have to set it up this weekend because we're doing training on Monday. You need a lot of bodies to help you unpack boxes, put computers on a desk, plug things in. It's not difficult. You've probably done it a million times with your computer at home, but you are part of that process of building out and getting that particular facility up and running. And not only do they see your work ethic, they also see how well you work with others. They also see how well you work with the technology. There are a lot of different ways to find something that works right. So when you start asking questions about how can I get my foot in the door, how can I move up within my current organization, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But fundamentally, if you show an interest in the technology, you apply yourself to learn and continue to learn in this industry, the sky is the limit. It doesn't matter. You will just keep moving up and moving up and moving up. And it's very hard to find a ceiling in this industry. And when you finally do, it's a very comfortable ceiling. So you will work yourself up eventually to a place where I'm happy. I'm happy doing what I'm doing right now. And of course, with IT, you never know where things are going to go. You never know how things are going to change. So not only are you doing something now, you will find yourself suddenly redirected without any type of warning into something completely different. That happens in my career, that has probably happened 4 or 5 times. I was minding my own business. I was doing my job. I was continuing to work with interesting projects, learn new technologies, and then I get a phone call. A phone call from a recruiter, a phone call most usually from a friend, someone I've worked with in the past, someone who I had a good relationship with, who said, hey, I just talked to these people over here. They've got this startup going on. They're going to completely change the world of IT security. And I've looked at their stuff and it's pretty interesting. Now, when somebody out of the blue you don't know says, you need to look at this company because they're pretty amazing, that's really nothing you can take at face value. Of course, you're going to tell me that. But when a friend calls you and says, I just looked at this thing and it's pretty amazing, you got to come see this. You approach it differently. Like, oh, okay, well, let me go see that. And that's exactly what happened to me. I got a call driving down the road from somebody I worked with years ago who thought of me when they saw this technology and said, I'm going to take a job at this company. You should think of doing the same thing. And I said, well, I'll go look at them. I'm going to go to a trade show next week. They're at the same trade show. Let me go by and see what's going on. And he was right. They had a technology that the industry had never seen before, that people said couldn't even work, that people said there's no way this does what it does. And that was Palo Alto Networks. I was one of the first systems engineers that worked at Palo Alto Networks with a technology called a next generation firewall. That for the first year, my job was effectively, when I'd show it to people would say, nuh-uh. My job was to say, nuh-uh. That was it. That's what I did for the first year. No, it really does work. People would say, there's no way this does what you say it does. Like, let's plug it in, click. That was the funnest part of that job, by the way. People not believing something works, and then it's like a magic show. You plug it in. Not only does it do what we say it does even more. Because we aren't going to tell you the more it does, because there's no way you'd believe that. But you'll believe it if you see it. And my job was to know enough of that product, to know everything about that product so we could plug it in and really show people the magic inside of that device. So sometimes you never know where this world of IT goes. You really do have to be prepared for anything. And I think that preparation is an important part of the process for your current position, but it is also giving you a foundation that allows you to pivot to something else if that opportunity ever arises. And remarkably, opportunities arise in IT all the time. Let's do another question. More. We got a lot here. It's a pretty good one. I like this one just because it takes me back. This is from Ali, who asks, do you think having the A+ cert is good for a grade 11 student? Yes. This excites me just seeing this question. Thank you for sending this question, Ali. This is something that I think we don't do enough of. And I'm not sure, well, I sort of understand why, but I'm not sure why. Is that the world of IT, for whatever reason, there's a number of reasons behind this. And through the years, I've mentioned this, we've talked about it. It's been something that I've spent a lot of time pondering, is that there is a big effort in this world on application development, on computer science, on how to program. And if you were to ask people that are in positions of power, what should we do with technology? Learn to program. That's what they tell you to do. You need to learn to write these programs. I could not write an application for you. And really no one in IT is in a position where they've even been trained on how to write an application. And yet there is an enormous group of people in all of these extremely large and small companies that you will run into that need to know how to keep the networks up and running, how to protect the data, how to make the services available, how to connect you to the internet, how to protect the data as it's transferring across the internet, how to process all of your credit card transactions, how to run the reports that you need at the end of the month, how to handle all of the computing requirements that you have, how to make the cloud do what you need the cloud to do. Those aren't programmers. Those aren't people writing applications. Those are people in IT, in information technology. And that's why whenever people say that, where should we put an effort into learning these technologies? IT is a great place because you're learning about operating systems. You're learning about networks. You're learning about security technologies. And I will tell you, if I think of myself back in the days of grade 11, maybe a little bit older than that, maybe if we go back in the days when I was in college, where we actually had networks and had computers that we could take home with us and put on our desk at home. Those technologies and the idea of connecting us up with a network, the idea of adding security to our systems, the idea of running applications, of managing how these applications are backed up, how our data is protected. It's the same fundamentals today as it was back then. Obviously, we were using different operating systems. It was a different process to back up and restore the data. It was a different process to network all of these devices together. We used different protocols to network all of these devices together over different types of media. But the fundamental process of connecting, using these protocols, protecting the data, using the applications is identical to the fundamentals that we use today. All we've done was build on it. So if you are someone you're in high school and you're wondering, should I really go through this cert? It may be that the certification itself is not something that you will be able to leverage, to use, and to put in front of somebody until you get out of college, when you're really looking for a job. But you could, of course, if you get your certification in high school, you will be able to renew it, and so that you will have that A+ when you're ready to graduate from college. But perhaps more importantly, especially at that point, you've now learned the fundamentals of technology. You've learned about operating systems. You've learned about these commands you can run at the command prompt. You've learned about Linux and Mac OS. You've learned about the cloud. You've got the basics of security. These are things that you will be able to build on your entire career. And so that's why even if you don't take the A+ exams and pass them, you've still gone through all of the exam objectives. And that is a very powerful set of tools that you will be able to use as you go through the rest of your schooling, not only at the secondary school level, which is what grade 11 and grade 12 would be here in the US, but also in the higher level education in the college and university level. So I think it's a great idea to get your certification when you're in high school, because all you're going to be doing is building on that for the rest of your career, and why not get it now? I think if I had had the opportunity in high school to get my A+, I would have loved that. That would have been fantastic. The idea of personal computers only really came out while I was in high school. That was the first time our high school got a computer. So when I was in high school, I was probably in the 11th grade myself, and our school got these computers that you could put on a desktop. Before that, computers were in a big room. Only the biggest companies in the world had them. You had no access to any of those. All you would see is the pictures on TV of the tape drives spinning around and the punch cards coming out of it. You had no idea what any of that stuff was. But then we got our own computers, and you could do your own programming. You could write your own applications. You could write your own simplified apps, or you could use the applications they were giving you to perform different functions. And that was something we had never had our hands on before. Well, now look at where we are. If you're in high school, you have access to the world. You've got the internet. You have a wide variety of computing devices. You're carrying around a computing device in your hand. You've got tablets, you've got laptops, you've got desktop computers that you could build yourself and put together. There is no better time in the history of history than now for someone who wants to get into the world of technology. It excites me for you to be in 11th grade and to have all of these technologies available to you. And once you know them and once you work with them, you now have an entire career that you now can leverage. It is a remarkable time in what we are doing. And Ali, I think absolutely getting the A+ cert is good for grade 11 and others. You should absolutely look into that. Let's keep going through I know we're at the top of the hour. I want to fit in at least one more question so we can get in and work through these. We've got more to go with. So we talked a little bit about this. This is a technical question, but I think it's good to do these every once in a while. Keeps me on the sharp side. This is from Greg, who asks, hey, what's the difference between Kerberos, TACAS Plus, and Radius in terms of functionality and use cases? Well, this comes up quite a bit. Being able to understand the difference between all of these. It's many and varied. Some people try to find certain ways to differentiate one from another. I don't know that type of differentiation is truly useful, but I have tried to put my own differentiation into my training materials. So I want to pull up, that's why I'm killing some time here, because I want to pull up my Security Plus course. I think I also have this in my Network Plus course. And I want to show you what I wrote as it applies to this particular question. Kerberos. Let's just search for that in my big list of security. And I'll tell you, I wrote this down because I think it's a common question that we want to be able to deal with. And of course, I don't have that immediately in front of me. So let me just summarize it for you. So I know what I wrote. I just need to get it in front of you. If you look at a number of different training materials, they do try to differentiate. This is Kerberos and all of the little intricate things that Kerberos does for you. This is LDAP and all of the intricate things that LDAP does for you. And here is TACAS Plus and all of the intricate things that TACAS Plus can provide to you. And indeed, all of those that I just mentioned, Kerberos, TACAS Plus, LDAP, there's others we can work with. Each one of them does have unique aspects to it. And if we were to drill down into how they work at a very low level, you would see that there are certain features and certain authentication protocols that are very different than other authentication protocols. For the purposes of your A+, and indeed the purposes of your authentication that you do in your corporate environment, it often comes down to a very broad understanding of these. First, you should know that Kerberos, TACAS Plus, LDAP, and other authentication protocols are all effectively doing the same thing. They're authenticating. They're checking your username. They're checking your password. They're seeing if those things match. Maybe they're also looking at any other type of authentication mechanism, maybe some type of check for biometrics. Maybe they're checking to see if there's a code you can enter. Maybe they're going to send you a text message. But once it does the authentication, it's allowing you access into a resource. At a very high level, that's exactly what all of these do. So you could swap one of these out for the other, and at a very high level, it's providing authentication. TACAS does effectively the same thing that LDAP does effectively the same thing that Kerberos does when you are talking about authentication. It's when you start getting into the intricacies of these authentication protocols where you may find there are some advantages and disadvantages when compared against each other. For example, Kerberos requires a relatively well-established set of cryptographic standards. So you need a PKI, a public key infrastructure. You need somebody to manage your certificate authority. You need somebody who can produce certificates for Kerberos, because the internals of Kerberos work on a very tightly focused set of cryptographic principles. LDAP, although there may be encryption with the LDAP communication, LDAP doesn't have that same cryptographic requirement associated with it. It effectively takes your username and password, checks to see if it's right, and it lets you in. There's no ticket that you're given. There's no single sign-on associated with it. And so it's much more simple to implement. And that's why if some organizations, they may be tasked with which one do we use? Well, let's use LDAP. It's a lot easier to implement. There is a front end to LDAP on Active Directory, so we can kind of circumvent the complexities associated with Kerberos and just talk directly to the Active Directory database using LDAP instead of Kerberos. So there is a fundamental use case difference between those. We don't really go into that level of detail with the A+, and really not much of that level of detail with the others. I've seen a lot of other training materials try to break it down into these very specific and minute use cases for each one of these things, and I think that's relatively pointless because at the high level, they all do the same thing. Some people even say Kerberos, or they'll say TACAS, for example. TACAS is one that is has a history that is very focused on Cisco technologies. And I've seen study materials that say you would only use TACAS if you're logging into a Cisco router. Well, that is a very common use case for TACAS because of its history. But that's not the only use case. It's an authentication protocol. You could use TACAS to authenticate to anything, including Windows, including Linux, including anything else. So don't get wrapped up in the details of these things. You want to instead focus on what are these used for? They're used for authentication. Could you use them to authenticate to anything? Yes, you could. That's it. So don't worry so much about, have I got the right use case? Which one do I choose in which scenario? Quite honestly, having implemented authentication mechanisms for these firewalls I mentioned, I've implemented them on LDAP, on Kerberos, on TACAS, and on other methods as well. All of them depended on what the customer already had. So if somebody already had an LDAP front end set up and they used it all the time, they were familiar with it, oh, let's use LDAP. Somebody said, well, we're running Kerberos. We really like the single sign-on functionality. We don't like to use LDAP. We feel that Kerberos is more secure because it has the cryptography built into it. We'd like to set up the authentication from Kerberos, even though you could do it with LDAP. Okay, we'll do it with Kerberos. So sometimes it's whatever the customer wants to do. It's whatever we happen to have. I've had a customer say, well, we've got Radius right here. I have a Radius server. We just do everything to Radius. It turns out in some environments, especially very large companies, Active Directory, because it is such a valuable resource, it is effectively the center of your network database. All of your usernames are in there. All of your user passwords are in there. All of your certificates for encryption, especially things like BitLocker, are in there. And there's so much more in there as well. That's a pretty important database. You don't want anything bad to happen with Active Directory. So in very large companies, the organizations, the part of the organization in charge of networking may not have access to that database. They may not be able to query that database using Kerberos. They may not be able to perform authentication using LDAP to that database because it's not their database. And the people that own the Kerberos database, the part of the organization that's responsible for keeping that Kerberos database up and running, they don't want you to have access. You could break it. They're probably right. I probably could. So no, you don't want me to have access. They don't give me access. So this requires the network team to build their own authentication server that can be used just for them. Perfectly reasonable in this scenario. And they might just use Radius. There's a lot. Radius is a very common authentication protocol. There's a very popular implementation of Radius called Free Radius. Turns out it doesn't cost anything. That's nice. It's in the name. So Free Radius, they'll build their own Free Radius server. They'll populate it with the username and passwords, and that's what they use for authentication. So sometimes it's whatever you got is what you'll use. And it has nothing to do necessarily with the intricate use cases and comparisons across the different authentication protocols. Indeed, that just happens to be what we got. So let's use Radius. It's sometimes it's that simple and using it that way. So you can feel, okay, here's my Radius IP address is this, and here's the authentication, the secret code that allows us to access the Radius database. Done. You can log in with your Radius ID. And it will go over and ask that Radius ID and give you the authentication. That's it. The configuration for all these is basically the same. Where's the database? Here's the IP address. What secret code allows you access to the database? It might be username and password. It might be some other property. It might be a certificate. It might be a different username. Put that in, and then you're done. That's it. And then from there, it just does all the authentication. So there's not much to show, not much to demonstrate there, because they're all effectively the same thing. Okay. Let's see if we can, thank you for that question, by the way. Let's keep going through the list. I know we're 10 minutes after. Let's fit one more in, right? We can get through this list. Got to make another one on the entire list of things. A lot of great questions in here, by the way. I'm sorry that I can't get through every single one of these today, but there certainly is a way to focus on this. Okay, and since we're talking about this, first let me give you I owe my brother a shout out. We just had the holidays, of course. We're here in January and December. My brother and his family came over, and we had a fantastic holiday here at the house. Cooked some ribs, we watched some TV, the kids were running around. We had a great time. It was fantastic. They were playing with the dogs. It was fantastic. And Darby says, well, in the past you mentioned your brother's fudge business, and indeed UnclePhil'sFudge.com is where you need to go to get the best fudge locally created here in Florida. And it has a little bit of a Florida twist to it in a number of the fudge flavors that he has. He has an amazing key lime fudge, for example. It says, is there a website to view and order? I have vegan friends who may enjoy the vegan fudge you mentioned. And indeed, Uncle Phil, we talked to him about his fudge business every time he comes over. How's business? What's going on? How's things with the fudge? And he brings over a bunch of fudge, and we just have a great time. And he mentioned that his vegan fudge is one of the most popular options that he has. It has just taken off. And we had a big conversation about it. Like, what is that about? How'd you even figure that part out? That's because he spends so much time he does this fudge business in person in many cases. So he'll go to the local shows, local craft shows and that type of thing. And you'll see the tent that he has set up, Uncle Phil's Fudge. And that's what he does a lot of. The other part of his business is here online. So if you go to UnclePhil'sFudge.com, that is Uncle Phil Messer who's making his fudge. He has all of these great fudges online, and you can order them. He will ship them to you. I was talking to him about that. He has an event calendar on here, and a dark chocolate Cuban espresso fudge creamsicle. I got to have some of that one over the holidays. Super good. Dark chocolate peanut butter fudge, things you've never seen before. And indeed, he has vegan fudge in here as well. He has a hard time keeping it in stock. So if you ever see it on his website, you can always send him a note from the website himself. Here's a vegan cookies and cream fudge, vegan Cuban espresso, vegan dark chocolate, dark chocolate pecan fudge, not pecan. That's a pecan fudge. We had a long conversation about that too. Vegan mint chocolate chip. So lots of vegan fudges are out there. A lot that you can work through. There's just, whenever he comes over, we have the best time, but I eat too much fudge. I go home with so much sugar on this because it's so good. Part of the problem though, if I was buying this, I'd buy 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them and then I'd eat them over time. He just brings a stack over and we just go through the new flavors and we go through flavors he's not released yet. So that's the kind of the funnest part where we really start eating is he has, try this one. Like, what does that taste like? I haven't had that. That's a new one. What is it? And we try to figure it out. We have a lot of fun with that. So thank you for mentioning it. Uncle Phil does a great job with his fudge. I love what he's done with it. And I like to tell people about him all the time at unclephilsfudge.com. Does not serve them as a whole platter of fudge. No, it's cut up and it cooks into it cooks into layers. So he cuts them up into those bricks and then that's how you get them. So much good stuff there. Have a look at his website. He's got some great things there. If you're looking for a gift for somebody, something unique, or you just love fudge like we do, it's a great site to go to, unclephilsfudge.com. Now I know that we're sort of 15 minutes after, but I want to do one more. People asking me if I'm a fan of a particular football team. No, not particularly. No. Others that are here. Okay. Let's talk about A+ and renewing A+ and timing for A+ and all of the other pieces there. This is from Gloria, who says, hey, PM, I understand the A+ expires this year. The proper term, or the term that CompTIA likes us to use, is retires. The A+ retires this year. If you have an A+ certification, it is good for 3 years. And at the end of that 3-year period of you earning that certification, it will expire if you do not renew it. So that's why they try to use those terms differently. So I understand the A+ retires this year. Would it be possible that they extend the deadline to the end of November, as you might have said in previous study groups? As I'm watching the 1102 and I have limited knowledge. We don't know. We don't know what the date will be for the retirement of the current A+ exam series. We do know that when they release a new version, they tend to keep the current version available for people to take for 6 months. 6 months is a long time. 6 months is probably the longer end for studying for both of these exams. So what they're trying to do is when they release a new version, they often change the exam objectives. They update things. They get rid of some things that are in the objectives and they add some new things. So what they don't want to do is suddenly come up with a day and say, all right, if you've been spending all of your time studying that old version, it's gone. That would be awful. They don't do that. So that is why they instead give you this time frame where you can finish up knowing that it's going to go away at a particular date. It will retire at a particular date. So we don't know what those dates are yet. And that's because we got a long time before we ever get there. Now, they may be able to give us a little more information as we're in January at this point, and we really think it may come out in the next 3 months or so. Maybe 2 months, maybe 4 months, we don't know. But once they release and say, finally, the new exam is going to be available on this day, they very often at the same time say, and the existing exam will still be around until this retirement date. So all I can really tell you is to be patient. They will be providing some retirement date information over the next number of months. We just don't have any of that yet, which tells me that we got a long time before we even have to worry about that particular version of the exam retiring. And indeed, you shouldn't have to worry about it at all. If you're studying right now for your A+, you will very easily be able to get through your studies by the end of the year. Now, I realize that there are challenges when a new exam comes out. By the way, if you're already A+ certified, none of this matters to you. What they do with the list of questions they ask on the exam is irrelevant if you've already earned your A+ certification. So if you already have your A+ and you know you're in that 3-year time frame right now, whatever they change with the exams is irrelevant to you, because you're not going to take the exams again to renew your cert. You're going to collect CEUs. You might take a higher level CompTIA exam. You might just do the Cert Master CE. Now, you could take the new exam series to renew your certification, but that is probably the most arduous method. That is the hardest way to do it, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would instead have you just focus on renewing through the normal processes. But if you have already earned your A+, let's say you've been working on this A+ certification, and you finish it up in April and you've earned your A+ cert. On April the 1st, you now are A+ certified. And on April the 2nd, they say, look, there's a new exam version out. It means nothing to you. Your certification's good for 3 years. So really they could change the exam every week if they wanted to. They could change it every day if they wanted to. Doesn't matter to you. So that's why I tell folks that if you want to renew, focus on one of the renewal methods they have on their site. We've already gone through a number of those in our live stream today in the after show. Have a look at that continuing education section on the CompTIA website, or have a look at the video I created. It's in the YouTube video description of this video of how to renew your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certification in just a few hours. And that gives you another couple of ideas on how you might want to renew your certification. Regardless of whether you earn your certification today, you for whatever reason need to wait for the next edition of these exams to earn your certification, which I don't recommend, but sometimes we know that things are going to be happening in our life and we can't study right now, but we can study in the summer. Maybe that's what things are happening like that for you. I don't know that everybody is that way, but that might be your particular scenario. That's fine. At that point, when you're ready to start your studies, have a look at the landscape, see what options are available to you, and then you can pick an exam version that makes sense for you and makes sense for your time frame. And that's probably the best way to have a look at this. And I think that's an important consideration. Remember, you have to pass both the Core 1 and Core 2 from the same series to be A+ certified, which means you can't pass the Core 1 today and then in June pass the Core 2 from a new exam. Doesn't work that way. They aren't compatible with each other. So the Core 1 and Core 2 have to be from the same series of exam. Regardless of which one you choose, get your A+ certification and get it as fast as you can. Having that certification in your pocket is much more valuable than you waiting around for a new version to be released on a date that at this point we still don't know when it's going to be. So focus on earning your 2201101 and 2201102. You're good with that version until the end of 2025, and you'll be able to get through all of those in a timely manner, certainly by that point. And then at that point, if there are problems or concerns about the dates, we can address that then. We can talk about those things. And by then, we'll have a lot more knowledge about timeframes. We'll know exactly when these releases are, and we'll know exactly when the retirement dates are. At this point, none of us have to worry about any of those. You focus on those exam objectives, get those in your head, make sure you know all of those objectives, be very familiar with what's expected of you on that exam. And if you check marked every single one of those bullets on the objectives, you're going to walk into that room and pass your exam without any problem whatsoever. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thanks for being part of this live stream. We do love the Q&A that you provide. Thank you so much for joining us in the first hour as well. Remember that we do these every month. You can always find out when the next event is going to be by visiting our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. And if you want to join us next week, we have our Network Plus study group on Wednesday of next week. We'd love for you to come back for that one as well. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ study group.